Captain Lee Taman stared at the scanner display and felt his stomach drop. 3 massive ships had appeared from nowhere, their hulls gleaming like black glass in the starlight. They were bigger than anything in the human fleet, and they moved with a grace that made his skin crawl. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures I've never seen before," called out Park Ji-won from the communication station. Her voice was steady, but Taman could hear the fear underneath. "These aren't human ships." "No kidding," muttered Kim Hyun-woo from the engineering console. "Look at those power readings. Whatever they're using for engines, it's way beyond our tech." The Horizon's Edge was a good ship, one of Earth's finest exploration vessels. She had traveled farther from home than any human ship before her. But as the alien vessels closed in, Taman realized they might never see Earth again. "Red alert," he ordered. "All hands to battle stations. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've made contact." "I'm trying, sir," Ji-won said, her fingers flying over her controls. "Something's jamming our long-range communications. The signal isn't getting through." The lead alien ship was close enough now that Taman could make out details. It looked like it had been grown rather than built, with smooth curves and flowing lines that seemed almost alive. Strange symbols glowed along its hull, pulsing like a heartbeat. "They're hailing us," Ji-won reported. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that had never walked on any human world. The alien was tall and thin, with skin so pale it was almost transparent. Taman could see what looked like veins or wires running just beneath the surface, glowing with soft blue light. Its eyes were silver, like pools of liquid mercury. And when it spoke, its voice sounded like music played on broken glass. "Primitive vessels," the alien said, and somehow they could understand it perfectly. "You will surrender your ship and prepare to be processed. Resistance will result in immediate destruction." Taman stepped forward. "I'm Captain Lee Taman of the Earthship Horizon's Edge. Who are you and what do you want with us?" The alien tilted its head, studying him like a scientist looking at an interesting bug. "I am High Regent Vexthalon of the Velkari Empire. You are now property of the Empire. Your species designation is unknown, but you appear suitable for entertainment purposes." Entertainment purposes. Taman felt anger rising in his chest. "We're not anybody's property, and we're certainly not here for your entertainment." The alien's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "All inferior species serve the Empire in whatever capacity we deem appropriate. Your crude technology and primitive culture suggest you would be well suited for the arena worlds." Before Taman could respond, the Horizon's Edge shuddered as some kind of tractor beam locked onto the hull. Warning lights flashed across every console, and the ship groaned under forces it was never designed to handle. "They've got us," Hyun-woo called out. "I can't break free. Whatever they're using, it's draining our power systems." "Return fire," Taman ordered. "All weapons." The ship's laser cannons and missile tubes unleashed everything they had at the alien vessels. For a moment, brilliant flashes lit up the space between the ships, but when the light faded, the alien hulls showed no damage at all. It was like throwing rocks at a mountain. "Our weapons aren't even scratching their shields," reported Lieutenant Kim Dane from the weapons station. "Captain, I don't think we can fight our way out of this one." More alien ships were appearing now, surrounding the Horizon's Edge like sharks around wounded prey. The tractor beam was pulling them steadily toward the largest vessel, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "All hands, this is the captain," Taman announced over the ship's intercom. "Prepare for boarding. Destroy all classified materials and wipe the computer cores. Whatever happens, don't give them any information about Earth's defenses or the location of our colonies." The crew worked quickly and efficiently, even though they all knew it was probably hopeless. These aliens had technology that was centuries ahead of humanity's best efforts, but they were still going to make them work for whatever they wanted. The ship shuddered again as it was pulled into a docking bay that was larger than most spaceports on Earth. Strange lights played across the hull, and Taman could hear the hiss of atmosphere being pumped in around them. "They're cutting through the hull," Hyun-woo reported, "some kind of energy beam. It's slicing through our armor like it's paper." "Everyone stay calm," Taman said, though his own heart was pounding. "We don't know what they want yet. Maybe we can negotiate." But when the aliens finally boarded the ship, it became clear that negotiation was not on their minds. They moved like dancers, flowing through the corridors with weapons that hummed with contained energy. Their leader was another of the pale, ethereal beings, but this one wore armor that seemed to be made of living crystal. "Secure all specimens," it commanded in that same musical voice. "The High Regent wishes to examine them before processing." The human crew fought as best they could, but their weapons were useless against the alien armor. One by one, they were stunned into unconsciousness by energy beams that left them paralyzed but aware. Taman was the last to fall, trying desperately to reach the ship's self-destruct controls. When he woke up, he was in a cell that seemed to be carved from a single piece of crystal. The walls glowed with soft light, and he could see stars wheeling past outside. They were moving, but he had no idea where. His crew was gone. The ship was gone. Everything he had known and trusted had been stripped away in a matter of hours. But as he sat in that alien prison, Taman made himself a promise. Whatever these Velkari had planned for him and his people, he would find a way to fight back. He was human, and humans had survived worse odds before. They had made one mistake when they captured the horizon's edge. They had left him alive, and as long as he drew breath, he would never stop trying to get his people home. Outside his cell, alien guards discussed his fate in their musical language. They spoke of arena worlds and entertainment, of sport and spectacle. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in their empire's long history. They had decided to play games with a human being. And humans, Taman knew, played for keeps. The transport ship that carried Taman to his doom was as beautiful as it was terrifying. Through the crystal walls of his prison, he watched alien worlds drift past like jewels scattered across black velvet. Some glowed with strange colors that hurt his eyes to look at directly. Others seemed to pulse with their own inner light, as if the planets themselves were alive. But none of them prepared him for Kethmaran. The arena world was a patchwork of different environments stitched together by alien science. From orbit, Taman could see vast deserts next to frozen wastelands, tropical jungles bordering seas of liquid metal. Each zone was carefully designed to test different types of prey in different ways. Magnificent, is it not? High Regent Vexthalon appeared beside his cell, moving with that fluid grace that made Taman's skin crawl. Kethmaran has been the jewel of our entertainment empire for over 10,000 years. Countless species have provided sport for our noble houses within its carefully crafted biomes. "You're sick," Taman said quietly. "All of you. This whole empire is built on murder for fun." The High Regent's silver eyes reflected no emotion at all. "Your primitive concepts of morality are amusing. We are apex beings, the rightful rulers of this galaxy. Lesser species exist to serve our needs, whether as laborers, soldiers, or entertainment. You should feel honored to contribute to something greater than your crude civilization could ever achieve." The ship descended toward a landing platform that jutted out from a massive cliff face. Below them stretched the crimson wastes, a desert that seemed to glow with its own internal heat. Strange rock formations dotted the landscape like the bones of buried giants, and the sand itself moved in patterns that suggested hidden life beneath the surface. Taman was fitted with basic survival gear and given a weapon that looked more like a toy than a tool of war. The energy blade hummed when he activated it, but he could tell it was designed more for show than effectiveness. The Velkari wanted their entertainment to last long enough to be interesting, but not long enough to be inconvenient. "The rules are simple," explained the arena master, another pale alien with crystalline implants running along his skull. "Survive as long as you can. The longer you last, the more entertaining the experience becomes for our valued customers. Current betting suggests you will provide perhaps 30 minutes of adequate sport before expiration." Floating platforms began to rise from hidden bays in the cliff face, carrying elegantly dressed Velkari nobles to observation positions high above the killing ground. Their musical laughter echoed across the desert as they placed their bets and settled in to watch him die. The platform beneath Taman's feet began to descend toward the arena floor. As it did, he caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. Scattered across the sand were the bones of previous contestants, bleached white by the alien sun. Some were human. His crew had been here before him. The platform touched down in the center of the arena with a soft thud, then immediately began to retract back toward the cliff face. Taman was alone in the desert with nothing but his wits, his inadequate weapon, and the certain knowledge that something was hunting him. He didn't have to wait long to find out what. The sand began to shift about 50 meters away, forming a mound that grew larger and larger until something burst through in an explosion of crystal dust and roaring fury. The creature that emerged was like nothing from Earth's worst nightmares. It stood as tall as a house with 6 powerful legs ending in claws that could shred steel. Its hide looked like molten rock, glowing with internal heat that made the air shimmer around it. Multiple eyes tracked his movement with predatory intelligence. The Velkari called it a Veltora, and from the excited chittering of the nobles above, this was apparently a particularly fine specimen. The creature's roar shook dust from the cliff face and made Taemon's bones ache. His first instinct was to run, but there was nowhere to go. The arena was kilometers across, but the Veltora could probably cross that distance in minutes. Instead, he forced himself to think like the starship captain he was. What were his assets? What were his opponent's weaknesses? The creature charged, its massive form moving with surprising speed across the sand. But as it ran, Taemon noticed something important. Its multiple eyes were sensitive to light, contracting and expanding as they passed through different levels of illumination. And there, directly behind him, was one of those strange crystal formations he had noticed from orbit. Instead of running away from the charging monster, he ran toward it. The Veltora's roar of fury changed to something that might have been confusion as its prey suddenly changed direction, but it was committed to its charge and couldn't stop in time. Taemon dove to one side just as the creature crashed into the crystal formation. The impact sent vibrations through the crystalline structure that created a sound unlike anything Taemon had ever heard. It was like music and noise and pure mathematics all combined into one overwhelming frequency. The crystals sang and the Veltora screamed. The creature's sensitive eyes couldn't handle the resonant frequencies. It staggered back, clawing at its own head as the sound disrupted its sensory organs. Taemon didn't waste the opportunity. His energy blade, weak as it was, found the soft tissue between armor plates just behind the creature's jaw. The Veltora collapsed, its death throes causing the crystal to ring like a bell. Above them, the Velkari nobles had fallen completely silent. Taemon stood over his fallen opponent, breathing hard and covered in the creature's strange blue blood. He looked up at the observation platforms and raised his blade in a gesture that needed no translation. The hunt had begun. But he was no longer the prey. Over the next several days, the Velkari sent creature after creature to test him, shadow wasps that could phase through solid matter until they fed, when they became solid enough to kill, pack-hunting Silthak with acidic saliva that could melt stone, until Taemon learned to turn their own acid against them by using crystal reflectors. Each victory taught him more about the arena's ecosystem. Each battle was a puzzle to be solved, a problem that required human ingenuity rather than brute force. The Velkari had designed their entertainment around the assumption that prey would panic and die quickly. They had never faced something that learned from each encounter, but the greatest test was yet to come. Deep in the canyon that split the arena's heart, something ancient was stirring. The constant battles above had awakened guardians that had slept for thousands of years. The dragons of Kethmoran were rising, and when they emerged, the real test would begin. The ground beneath Taemon's feet began to shake 3 days after his first victory. At first, he thought it was just another creature burrowing up from the depths to hunt him. He had faced dozens of them by now, each one deadlier than the last. But this was different. This was something much bigger waking up. The tremors came from the great canyon that split the arena like a wound in the earth. Ancient rockfalls had hidden whatever lay in its depths, but now those carefully placed stones were shifting. Something was climbing up from the darkness below, and it was taking its time. The Velkari nobles on their floating platforms were buzzing with excitement. High Regent Vexthalon himself had arrived to witness whatever was about to emerge. His crystalline robes caught the light as he leaned forward, silver eyes fixed on the canyon mouth. "Finally," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the thin air, "the human has provided sufficient entertainment to wake the Ancient Ones. Now we shall see if it can face the dragons of Kethmoran." Dragons. Taemon felt his blood turn to ice water. He had seen the bones scattered throughout the arena, some of them burned to glass, others simply missing pieces as if they had been dissolved. Whatever was coming up from that canyon had killed everything that had ever faced it. The first head that emerged from the depths was larger than his entire ship had been. Scales that looked like molten metal caught the light as Rock tore the Flameheart, pulled himself up onto the arena floor. Each breath he took made the air around him shimmer with heat. And when he opened his mouth, Taemon could see fire burning in his throat like a contained star. Behind him came Vexacina the Stormwing, electricity crackling along her hide in patterns that made looking at her directly painful. Her wings were torn and scarred from countless battles, But when she spread them wide, lightning danced between the membranes like captured thunder. The third dragon was the most terrifying of all. Morgoth the Void Maw moved like liquid shadow, his black scales seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. When he breathed, the very air seemed to disappear, leaving empty space that hurt to look at. These were not the mythical creatures from human stories. These were weapons of war, bioengineered killing machines that had been built by hands that understood sciences humanity had never imagined. Each one was unique, a masterpiece of organic and synthetic fusion that made them nearly indestructible. The three dragons spread out to surround him, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of intelligence far beyond animal cunning. They had done this before many times. They knew exactly how to corner prey so that no escape was possible. Above them, the Velkhari were in a frenzy of excitement. Bets were being placed at incredible speeds as nobles wagered on how quickly the human would be consumed. Some were betting on whether there would be enough left of him to identify afterward. But as the dragons closed in, something strange happened. Instead of attacking immediately, they paused. Their ancient eyes, each one different but all blazing with intelligence, studied him with what seemed almost like curiosity. Roktor tilted his massive head, flames dimming to a gentle glow, rather than the raging inferno they had been moments before. Vexicina's electrical discharge faded until only small sparks played along her wings. Even Morgoth's terrible void breath dissipated into harmless wisps. They were listening to something. Desperation had driven Taman to experiment with the crystal formations throughout his time in the arena. Each one resonated at different frequencies, creating sounds that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple noise. He had used them as weapons, as shields, as tools to confuse and misdirect his enemies. Now, faced with certain death, he began to speak in the only language the crystals had taught him. Not words, but mathematical relationships expressed as sound, frequency patterns that described the fundamental forces of the universe in ways that had no translation into human speech. The dragons stopped moving entirely. For a long moment, silence stretched across the arena like a held breath. Even the Velkhari nobles had stopped their chattering, sensing that something unprecedented was happening below. Then Roktor did something that had never happened in the arena's 10,000-year history. He lowered his great head in what could only be interpreted as a bow. Vexicina followed, her wings folding against her sides as she too acknowledged him with a gesture of respect. Morgoth, the most terrible of the three, slowly settled his bulk onto the sand and fixed his void dark eyes on Taman, with what might have been recognition. The reason became clear when the mathematical language Taman had been speaking triggered something deep in their biomechanical consciousness. These were not wild beasts or even trained animals. They were the last guardians of a civilization that had vanished before humanity had learned to make fire. The architects, they had been called. The builders of wonders, the shapers of worlds, the race that had achieved godhood and then simply walked away from it all. They had left behind only ruins and guardians, waiting for someone who could speak their language and prove worthy of their legacy. Taman realized he was crying. Not from fear, but from the sudden understanding that washed over him like a tide. These dragons had been waiting for thousands of years, not for a master, but for someone who could hear the voice of their creators in the quantum foam that surrounded all things. High Regent Vex Thalon stood on his platform, his musical voice turned sharp with disbelief. "This is impossible." The guardians do not submit. They do not bow. They exist only to kill and consume whatever is placed before them. But Roktor's response was to turn his great head toward the Velkhari, noble, and release a gout of flame that turned a section of the cliff face to molten glass. The message was clear. The old rules no longer applied. Vexicina spread her wings and called down lightning that struck the floating platforms with surgical precision, disabling their repulsor systems without killing the occupants. One by one, the Velkhari nobles found themselves stranded on crippled platforms that were slowly sinking toward the arena floor. Morgoth simply opened his mouth and breathed, creating a void field that encompassed the entire observation area. Suddenly, the Velkhari could no longer hear each other speak, could no longer coordinate their response to what was happening below. The dragons were not submitting to Taman. They were offering him partnership. They were offering him the keys to secrets that could reshape the galaxy. But first, they needed to show him what lay beneath Kethmoran's surface. What the Velkhari had never known they were building their empire on top of. What had been waiting in the darkness for someone worthy of the architect's final gift? Morgoth lowered his great head until it was level with Taemon's position. An invitation and a challenge combined. The dragon's back was scarred from countless battles, but it was also fitted with biomechanical interfaces that pulsed with soft light. Taemon understood. To truly communicate with the Guardians, to access what they protected, he would need to interface directly with systems that had been ancient when Earth was young. It would change him in ways he could not imagine. But his crew was scattered across Velkhari prison worlds. His people were enslaved or dead. His entire species was marked for extinction or entertainment. He climbed onto Morgoth's back and felt the bio-neural interfaces connect with his nervous system. The last thing he heard before consciousness exploded into something vast and strange was the sound of crystal formations throughout the arena, beginning to sing in harmony. The real awakening was about to begin. The world exploded into light and sound and meaning that no human mind was designed to process. Taemon felt his consciousness stretch across dimensions he could not name, connecting to networks of information that spanned galaxies. For a terrifying moment, he thought he would simply dissolve into the vastness of it all, but something held him together, some stubborn core of human will that refused to let go of who he was. Even as alien knowledge poured into his brain like molten metal, he was still Lee Taemon, still the captain who had sworn to protect his crew. That identity became his anchor as the bio-neural interface completed its integration. When the initial shock faded, he found himself in a place that defied description. They were deep beneath Keith Moran's surface in chambers that hummed with contained power. The walls seemed to be made of crystallized space itself, bending light and shadow in ways that made his eyes water. Ancient machines lined the corridors, their purpose beyond human understanding, but somehow familiar now that the dragon's neural link let him perceive them properly. Morgoth's voice resonated directly in his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "Welcome to Ethan Prime, human, capital of the architects, heart of the first galactic civilization, tomb of gods who chose to become legend." The dragon's thoughts carried images and memories that were older than human history. Taemon saw the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago, when the architects had shaped worlds with tools that could rearrange matter at the quantum level. They had been builders first, conquerors never. Their empire had grown through cooperation rather than domination. What happened to them? Taemon asked, his own thoughts strange in the quantum communication network. Raktor's mental voice was like controlled fire, warm but dangerous. They saw what was coming. A darkness from beyond the galaxy's edge, something that consumed civilizations like fire consumes dry grass. They prepared weapons and defenses, technologies that could unmake stars and reshape the fundamental forces of reality itself. But the darkness never came, added Vexicina, her thoughts crackling with residual electricity. They waited for eons, building greater and greater weapons until they realized they were becoming the very thing they feared. They chose to fade away rather than become destroyers. The three dragons led him through corridors filled with wonders that made human technology look like stone knives and wooden clubs. Taemon saw matter compilers that could build entire fleets in hours, defensive systems that could turn attacking vessels into quantum foam, and communication networks that operated outside normal space-time. But the greatest revelation was yet to come. The Velkhari are parasites, Morgoth explained as they descended deeper into the complex. They found a few abandoned architect outposts and reverse-engineered enough technology to build their empire. But they understand none of it. They use tools of creation to spread destruction, pervert instruments of cooperation into weapons of domination. They entered a vast chamber where the walls themselves pulsed with stored information. Holographic displays showed star maps that covered the entire galaxy, each point of light marking either a hidden architect cache or a world under Velkhari control. The scope of both civilizations was breathtaking. "This is why we waited," Raktor said. "Not for a master, but for someone who could hear the architect frequencies. Someone who could be trusted with the keys to reshape the galaxy." The bio-neural integration was becoming more complete with each passing moment. Taemon could feel his consciousness expanding, gaining access to computational systems that processed information faster than human thought. But with the knowledge came responsibility that weighed on him like a physical force. "There are others," he said, and suddenly he could sense them through the quantum network. Humans scattered across dozens of prison worlds, other species enslaved by Velkari cruelty. Entire civilizations ground down to serve the entertainment empire's needs. Your crew member Park Jiwon is on the mining world of Velkasan, Vexasina informed him, her mental voice carrying precise coordinates. She has organized the slave workers into a resistance cell. But they lack weapons capable of threatening Velkari technology. Kim Hyunwoo remains imprisoned on Vorthak Prime, in the maximum security facility they call the Crucible, Roktor added. He has escaped 17 times, but they always recapture him. The Velkari find his persistence amusing. Kim Dane leads a group of survivors on the arena world of Mortakan. They hide in the ruins between games, scavenging what they can to stay alive, Morgoth concluded. The network showed him more than just his crew. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, millions of lives trapped in the Velkari web of cruelty, all of them waiting for someone to cut the threads that bound them. The architect weapons, Taman said, his consciousness exploring the vast armories that surrounded them. Can they break the Velkari Empire? In the right hands, Roktor replied. But using them requires more than just knowledge. The architects built safeguards to prevent their tools from becoming instruments of tyranny. They can only be fully activated by someone who understands the difference between liberation and conquest. Taman felt the weight of what they were offering him. Power beyond imagining, technology that could reshape the galaxy, weapons that could crack worlds and defenses that could stop stars, but also the responsibility to use them wisely, to free the enslaved without becoming a new form of oppressor. There is a price, Morgoth warned. The full integration will change you. You will still be human, but you will be more as well. You will see the universe as the architects did. Understand forces that your species has no words for. You may find it difficult to relate to others as you once did. Taman thought of his crew, scattered across hostile worlds and fighting for survival. He thought of all the other prisoners he had seen in the arena, the bones of those who had died for Velkari entertainment. He thought of Earth, unaware that contact with aliens had led to humanity being marked for extinction or slavery. Will it let me save them? He asked. All of them, Vexasina assured him, and many more besides. Then do it. The final integration was like being struck by lightning made of pure information. Taman felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his individual mind, connecting to quantum networks that spanned the galaxy. He could perceive every architect cache, every hidden weapon, every defensive system that the ancient civilization had left behind. But more than that, he could sense the other minds trapped in Velkari prisons, human thoughts that burned with defiance despite their circumstances, alien consciousnesses that had never given up hope of freedom. They were all connected now, part of a growing network that the Velkari had never imagined could exist. Park Jiwon's mental voice reached him across the void between stars. Taman, is that really you? The dragon said you were dead. I got better, he replied and felt her joy echo through the quantum link. How are you holding up? We've got 300 miners organized and ready to fight. But we need better weapons than mining tools. The Velkari guards have energy shields that laugh at everything we can throw at them. That's about to change, Taman assured her. I'm sending you something special. Through the dragons, he began transmitting architect weapon schematics directly into the minds of resistance leaders throughout the galaxy. Mining lasers enhanced with quantum-focusing crystals that could cut through Velkari armor like it was paper. Agricultural bioaccelerators modified to heal battle wounds in minutes. Communication devices upgraded to quantum-entangled networks that the Empire could never intercept or jam. The revolution was about to begin, and it would start with the tools the architects had left for exactly this purpose. The Velkari had built their empire on stolen architect technology, never realizing they were sitting on top of weapons that could destroy them. But winning the war would require more than just superior weapons. It would require coordination across thousands of worlds, perfect timing, and the kind of leadership that could unite dozens of species under a single cause. Fortunately, Taman was no longer just a human starship captain. He was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. He was a bridge between the ancient wisdom of the architects and the stubborn survival instincts of humanity. The Velkari Empire's days were numbered. They just didn't know it yet. The revolution began at dawn on 17 different worlds simultaneously. Taman felt each battle through the quantum network. His consciousness split across thousands of light years, as his allies struck at the heart of Velkari power. On Velkasan, Park Ji-won led her mining crews in an assault that turned industrial equipment into weapons of war. The enhanced laser cutters sliced through Velkari armor like butter, while the bioaccelerators kept her fighters in the battle even after taking hits that should have been fatal. The look on their faces when we started shooting back, she reported through the quantum link, her mental voice crackling with fierce joy. 300 years of being slaves, and they never thought we might learn to fight. The orbital platforms above Velkasan had been designed to process asteroid ore, but Ji-won's engineering background let her see their true potential. Within hours, the massive ion cannons that had been breaking apart space rocks were turned against the Velkari fleet. Cruisers that had seemed invincible found their shields overloaded by industrial equipment, never meant for war. Meanwhile, on Vorthak Prime, Kim Hyun-woo was finally putting his escape skills to good use. The architect teleportation technology let him bypass the Crucible's defenses entirely, appearing in the heart of the facility with weapons that made the guards' energy staffs look like toys. 17 escapes wasn't nearly enough, he transmitted as he led hundreds of prisoners out of their cells. Time to make sure none of us ever have to come back to this place. But the real surprise came from Kim Dane on Mortakan. The survivors hiding in the arena ruins had been contacted by something unexpected, the native species that had been enslaved there for generations. The insectoid Kythera had been secretly maintaining hidden manufacturing facilities, waiting for someone to provide them with the tools they needed to strike back. "Captain, you need to see this." Dane's thoughts carried images that made Taemin's enhanced mind reel with possibilities. "They've got entire underground cities down here. Industrial complexes that could build a fleet in days, not months." The Kythera had been patient, had been planning, had been preparing for this moment for longer than humanity had been aware aliens existed. Combined with architect fabrication technology, they could produce liberation fleets faster than the Velkari could destroy them. But coordination across such vast distances required more than just quantum communication. It required leadership that could adapt to changing circumstances in real time, making decisions that affected millions of lives across dozens of star systems. This was where Taemin's human nature became crucial. The architects had been builders and planners, designing elegant solutions to complex problems. But they had never been revolutionaries, had never had to coordinate desperate battles fought by people who had nothing left to lose. Humanity's greatest strength had always been adaptability, the ability to take whatever tools were available and use them in ways their creators never intended. Now, enhanced by architect technology but still fundamentally human in his thinking, Taemin became something the galaxy had never seen, a coordinator who could think like both a starship captain and a quantum computer. The dragons served as his rapid deployment force, their ability to traverse dimensional barriers letting them strike at critical Velkari installations before reinforcements could arrive. Roktor's flames consumed entire naval yards on the fortress world of Telvanus, while Vexasina's storms disabled orbital defense platforms around a dozen different systems. Morgoth's void breath turned Velkari command centers into empty spaces, leaving their fleets blind and leaderless. But the most devastating attacks came from an unexpected source, the Velkari's own entertainment systems. For centuries, they had used holographic technology to broadcast arena battles across their empire. Taemin turned those same networks into weapons, uploading architect viruses that crashed every system simultaneously. "Their whole fleet just went dark," reported Commander Lee Sumin, one of the human prisoners who had taken control of a Velkari battleship. "Weapons, shields, engines, everything. They're just floating in space like dead rocks." The psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical damage. A civilization built on the belief that they were superior to all other life forms suddenly found their victims fighting back with technology that made their own look primitive. Panic spread through the Velkari fleet faster than their commanders could contain it. High Regent Vexithalon, trapped on his crippled platform above Kethmoran, watched his empire crumble in real time. The musical quality of his voice turned harsh and discordant as he transmitted increasingly desperate orders to fleets that could no longer hear him. "This is impossible," he insisted, his silver eyes reflecting the fires that were consuming his orbital installations. "Inferior species cannot possess such technology." They lacked the intellectual capacity to understand architect systems. But Taman was no longer listening to Velkari propaganda. Through the quantum network, he was coordinating attacks across half the galaxy while simultaneously helping Park Ji-won redesign the Velkasan mining operation and assisting Kim Hyunwoo in liberating 3 more prison worlds. The enhanced consciousness that came with architect integration let him process information at inhuman speeds, but his human emotions kept him focused on what really mattered, the individual lives at stake in each battle. Every freed slave, every disabled Velkari warship, every world liberated from the entertainment empire's grip was a personal victory. Taman, Morgoth's mental voice carried a warning that made the quantum network ripple with concern. The High Regent is attempting to activate a reality destroyer weapon. If he succeeds, he will eliminate this entire star system rather than allow it to fall into rebel hands. Reality destroyer weapons were the most terrible legacy of the architect civilization, tools designed to unmake matter at the quantum level. The ancient race had built them to defend against the cosmic threat that had never come, then hidden them away when they realized such weapons were too dangerous for any species to possess. But the Velkari had apparently found one of the hidden caches and reverse-engineered enough of the technology to create their own version. It would not be as powerful as the original architect devices, but it would be more than sufficient to reduce Kethmaran and everything on it to quantum foam. "Can you stop it?" Taman asked. The 3 dragons exchanged thoughts faster than human speech, their consciousness interfacing with systems that had been ancient when their creators were young. Finally, Raktor responded with what might have been draconic laughter. "We are not merely guardians of architect technology, human. We are living embodiments of it. We were designed to counter exactly such weapons." The reality destroyer fired, its beam reaching across space toward Kethmaran with energy that could unravel the fundamental forces holding matter together. But as it struck the planet's atmosphere, something impossible happened. The dragons absorbed it. All 3 of them spread their wings wide and opened their mouths, creating a resonance field that captured the weapon's energy and redirected it back toward its source. The reality destroyer's beam became a mirror, reflecting Velkari destruction back at the fleet that had fired it. High Regent Vexthalon had just enough time to realize what was happening before his flagship ceased to exist on any meaningful level. The weapon designed to destroy a world instead consumed the very fleet that had wielded it. Across the galaxy, Velkari resistance began to crumble as word spread that their ultimate weapon had been turned against them. Species that had been enslaved for centuries saw their oppressors' technology fail, their fleets scatter, their empire collapse like a house built on sand. But Taman knew that winning the war was only the beginning. Governing a galaxy freed from tyranny would be far more difficult than destroying the tyrants. The real test was yet to come. Through the quantum network, he began reaching out to every liberated world, every freed species, every former slave who now had to decide what kind of future they wanted to build. The revolution was over. The harder work of peace was about to begin. The final battle was not fought with weapons or technology, but with words and trust and the simple human understanding that freedom meant nothing if it was imposed from above. In the months following the Velkari Empire's collapse, Taman found himself facing a challenge that no architect system could solve: how to unite dozens of species that had never learned to cooperate. The former arena world of Kethmaran had become the center of what the liberated species were calling the Galactic Liberation Council. Where once creatures had been forced to fight for alien entertainment, representatives from hundreds of worlds now worked together to build something better. The crystal formations that had once sung funeral songs for Velkari amusement now resonated, with messages of hope transmitted across the stars. The great canyon that had hidden the dragons became a meeting place where beings that had never trusted each other learned to find common ground. But it was not easy. The Kithara insist they deserve control of the former Velkari industrial worlds. Park Ji-won reported during one of their Quantum Link conferences. They claim their manufacturing capabilities give them the right to govern, and the Telmari want exclusive access to the architect weapon caches, added Kim Hyunwoo from his position coordinating relief efforts on Vorthak Prime. They say their warrior culture makes them the natural guardians of such dangerous technology. Meanwhile, the Zephyrians just want to be left alone to rebuild their shattered civilization. concluded Kim Dane from the diplomatic mission on Mortakan. They're threatening to withdraw from the Council entirely if we can't guarantee their independence. These were the problems that architect technology could not solve. Enhanced consciousness and quantum processing power were useless when dealing with species that had been at each other's throats for thousands of years, who had competing claims on limited resources, who had fundamentally different ideas about how a galactic civilization should function. But they were also problems that humanity had faced before, on a smaller scale. Earth's history was full of examples of different cultures learning to work together, sometimes through conflict, sometimes through cooperation, always through the messy process of negotiation and compromise. The Velkhari made one crucial mistake. Taman explained to a gathering of council representatives in the great crystal chamber beneath Kethmoran's surface. They thought that ruling through fear was the only way to maintain galactic civilization. But they were wrong. The strongest civilizations are built on cooperation, not domination. The assembled representatives included beings so different from each other that communication required multiple translation protocols. The insectoid Kithra communicated through chemical signals that had to be converted to quantum frequencies. The energy-based luminari existed as patterns of living light that interfaced directly with architect systems. The Telmari were massive, rock-like creatures that thought in geological time frames and spoke in harmonics that could shatter crystal. Yet somehow, they were all sitting in the same room trying to work together. Easy words, clicked Representative Velthak of the Kithra, her chemical signals carrying overtones of skepticism. But cooperation requires trust. How can we trust species that were our enemies under Velkhari rule? Because we all bled together, replied Captain Kim Dane, now serving as Earth's primary representative to the Council. We all fought the same enemy. We all know what it means to be enslaved. The negotiations went on for weeks, sometimes breaking down entirely when old grievances surfaced or new disputes arose. Several times entire delegations threatened to leave, convinced that their species would be better off going it alone. But each time, something brought them back. Maybe it was the memory of Velkhari cruelty, or the knowledge that there might be other empires like theirs still lurking in the galactic darkness. Maybe it was simply the realization that they had already achieved something unprecedented. Dozens of species working together without anyone pointing weapons at anyone else. The breakthrough came when Representative Zarthek of the Telmari made an unexpected proposal. We have been thinking about this wrong, he rumbled, his harmonic voice making the crystal walls vibrate. We debate who should control what, who should govern whom. But perhaps the question should be different. Perhaps we should ask not who rules but how we serve. Serve what? Asked Park Jiwan, who had taken leave from her mining operations to participate in the diplomatic process. The future, Zarthek replied. Our children, whatever form they may take. The generations that will inherit what we build here. Let us create not an empire, but a framework. Not rulers, but coordinators. Not subjects, but partners. The idea was radical, unprecedented in galactic history. No civilization had ever tried to govern through genuine consensus across multiple species. But then, no civilization had ever had access to both architect technology and human stubbornness. The final agreement took shape slowly, hammered out in countless sessions that tested everyone's patience. The Galactic Liberation Council would not be a government in any traditional sense. It would be a coordination network, a way for independent worlds and species to cooperate on mutual interests while maintaining their sovereignty. Trade, disputes would be mediated through quantum arbitration, systems that could process complex negotiations in real time. Defense would be provided by volunteer fleets from member species, coordinated through the architect communication networks. Technology would be shared freely, with safeguards to prevent any single species from gaining too much advantage. And overseeing it all would be a rotating council of coordinators, chosen not for their power or wealth, but for their ability to build bridges between different ways of thinking. Taman was offered the position of first coordinator, but he declined. I've been changed by architect technology, he explained. Enhanced, improved, expanded beyond normal human limits. But that also means I'm not fully human anymore. This galaxy needs leaders who can still relate to the species they serve. Instead, the position went to a collective of representatives from different worlds, with the understanding that leadership would rotate regularly to prevent any one voice from becoming too dominant. Taman would serve as an advisor and coordinator, using his enhanced capabilities to help manage the complex networks that held the Alliance together. The dragons found their own roles in the new order. Roktor became a guardian of the architect weapon caches, ensuring that the most dangerous technologies remained secure, but available if the galaxy faced existential threats. Fexicina took charge of the communication networks, her storm generation abilities perfect for maintaining quantum entanglement across galactic distances. Morgoth became an explorer, using his dimensional abilities to search for other architect sites and potential threats from beyond known space. Years passed. The former arena world of Kethmoran transformed into a thriving center of galactic civilization. The crystal formations now sang with the voices of 100 species sharing knowledge, art, and dreams of a better future. Where creatures had once been forced to kill for entertainment, scientists from dozens of worlds collaborated on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But the most important changes were smaller, more personal. Kim Hyunwoo returned to engineering, but now he designed ships that carried relief supplies to war-torn worlds rather than weapons of destruction. Park Ji-won established a network of mining cooperatives that shared resources fairly among member species. Kim Dain became a mediator, helping resolve conflicts before they could escalate to violence. And Taman, his consciousness still enhanced by architect technology but his heart still human, watched it all with quiet satisfaction. The galaxy was far from perfect. There were still disputes, still problems, still species that chose isolation over cooperation. But there were no more arena worlds, no more beings forced to fight for the entertainment of others, no more empires built on the suffering of the innocent. "You did well, human," Morgoth commented one day as they stood together in the crystal chamber, watching representatives from 50 different worlds debate the finer points of interspecies trade agreements. "We all did," Taman replied. "Humans, dragons, Kithra, everyone. The Velkari were wrong about one fundamental thing. They thought strength came from making others weak. But real strength comes from making everyone stronger." The dragon's ancient eyes reflected something that might have been amusement. The architects would have been proud. They spent millions of years building tools and weapons, preparing for threats that never came. But you and your species found a better way to use their legacy. What way is that? You turned instruments of war into foundations for peace. You took weapons designed to destroy and used them to build something better. Even we Guardians never imagined such a use for our Creator's gifts. Outside the chamber, the business of galactic civilization continued. Ships arrived and departed, carrying goods and passengers and messages between worlds that had once been enemies. Scientists shared discoveries that advanced the boundaries of knowledge. Artists collaborated on works that celebrated the diversity of galactic life. And in the quantum networks that connected it all, the voice of humanity could still be heard. Not as conquerors or rulers, but as the species that had refused to break.